they say there's no two people on earth exactly the same. No two faces, no two sets of fingerprints. But do they know that for sure? Because they would have to get everybody together in one huge space. And obviously, that's not possible, even with computers. And not only that, they'd have to get all the people who ever lived, not just the ones now. So they got no proof. They got nothing.
Thank you, Christopher. Very enlightening. Welcome to Cut to Black, a Sopranos sit down. We are here discussing Sopranos season 3, episode 2, Proshai, Livushka. I am Jim Scampoli.
I'm Jacob Burrows, and oh gosh, it's a sad one. It's a sad episode, I guess. You know, I'm glad she's dead, but it's still sad. This is now I know what you meant when you said like the first 2 episodes of this season were going to be a bit special, because they certainly have been.
Yes. Here we are. This episode was written by David Chase, who we know as the creator, the one who birthed it all for us, and directed by Tim Van Patten, which is a name we've heard before and we will hear again. So some mainstays with The Sopranos. And yes, a pretty big deal episode. Now, I was going to ask you this beforehand, but it would have been kind of a spoiler, so I didn't bother asking. But I assume you weren't aware of any type of real-life repercussions that happened for the show.
I mean, I figured it out. Like, yeah. I know this is not what they wanted to do, clearly. And also, I mean, also spoiler for later in the episode, but even before she passed away, I made a note of like, she looks like fucking Yoda in like the new old Star Wars, the old new Star Wars. She looks not real. She's computer generated, but I still didn't put it together. I was like, that's weird. Why did they do that? But then clearly she died. So yeah.
Yes, Nancy Marchand suffered from both lung cancer and emphysema. Died on June 18th, 2000 in Connecticut, one day before her 72nd birthday. Character's death was written into the third season storyline of The Sopranos. I guess her husband of 48 years, actor Paul Sperrer, had died the previous year, also from cancer. Yikes. And she was posthumously inducted in the American Theater Hall of Fame. So, yeah, for reading up on it, because I always wondered clearly this thing with the airline tickets was something that was going to play out a bit more. Some of the notes here, what was I reading? David Chase had planned a major storyline for the third season concerning Tony's efforts to patch things up with his mother to prevent her from testifying against him at the Rico trial. And then, of course, obviously her real life death threw a monkey wrench into that system. And the idea of Olivia being made to testify is also mentioned at the FBI meeting in the previous episode, Mr. Ruggiero's Neighborhood. But it's weird. It's interesting because, like where The Sopranos, so this is the beginning of season 3. We know it goes on to basically 7 seasons, 6A and 6B. But clearly, Livia Soprano was going to be a big part of, I believe, not just season 3, but the show as a whole. And it's almost like if, that actress Lorraine Bracco, who plays Melfi, just died, and they were like, we can't get him a new psychiatrist. Let's just rewrite the whole show.
Well, yeah, or it's even worse. It's like if Tyrion Lannister died in season 1 of Game of Thrones, and it's like, well, what are we going to do now? Who cares? They just recast him. They just recast people for fun on Game of Thrones anyway, and they could have done that here, but I'm glad they didn't, because that would have been dumb. But at the same time, this episode isn't. The clip from the beginning is great, but in general, this episode feels as disjointed and weird as the previous one, which we talked about a lot. That it was a bit strange and a bit different. This one. There's other stuff in the episode as well that I thought didn't really match the tone of what The Sopranos usually does. who am I to say that if David Chase wrote it? But like, if we go back to the start of it, there's an explosion, a truck explodes. That's all well and good. Then we see a newspaper, and telling the tale of this exploded truck, and then we see Tony on the floor with something red that looks like blood. I already know that's not blood because of the way it's not going to be blood. Okay, I already know that. I know that's not what this is. And then they do a rewind that really felt weird. That did not feel like The Sopranos to me. I don't know. What did you think?
It is a weird choice. Every now and then, and I mean, it's kind of popped up similar things in like the first season and the second season as well, where they kind of make these bizarre choices. Not to say that they don't work. It just kind of seems like it comes out of nowhere. And yeah, it's this kind of connection to then Meadows rewinding the movie, The Public Enemy, but not in a way that you would even for you kids out there that don't have VHS these days. You didn't just have a movie playing while you were rewinding it, like because you were rewinding the tape or whatever. You stop it and then you hit rewind and then it just rewinds on its own. So yeah, it's like this weird connection. And then I guess I like they're trying to go for this weird implication of like, first, yeah, we see that this garbage firebomb goes off and there is it's "wow" written on the back of the garbage truck. That is an Opie and Anthony reference for any of the East Coasters out there. This was back heyday. Yeah, you used to put "wow" on the back of your trucks, and that was it. Women were supposed to see it and then flash you on the highway. Whip them out Wednesday is what it was.
Okay.
So the garbage firebomb goes off. Then we see the newspaper headline, and then we see Tony out. And you could almost first be like, oh no, is Tony, did they take him out? And then it's like, oh no, did Tony have an anxiety attack because of all this stress with the mob? And then the reveal is, I mean, I guess it's partially that, but then it's also he
was so racist that he passed out, basically.
The fact that he saw his daughter with a black man who's like, don't take this the wrong way, but he's very light-skinned black, so it's even just that Tony can't get past it. You know what I mean?
Well, he calls him a moulignon, which is this Italian type slang. I don't know where it's from, but it's for a mixed person, right? That's what I believe it's for.
I think moulignon is just Italian for black people in general, but I don't know because I think they mention it when they're dealing with the rapper in season 1. I believe they say moulignon as well.
Yeah. So he's so, like we said, he's so racist that he passes out. But also, like, I never believed that he was like had been shot in the head, and they shoot it with like the red stuff by his head to make it seem like he's,
yeah,
what is that, jam or ketchup? Who gives a shit? And I never believed that. So there's no real tension in this scene. The rewind is an odd choice, and it goes on for about 20-30 seconds. So it's not like it's a quick flash or anything. But yes, he really talks a lot of shit here, and it's moments like this where it's like, Tony, come on.
I
Tony.
They really go for it, and especially now, I mean, if we want to relate it into 2018, like, you wouldn't be able to do that, I feel, like with your main character.
Yeah.
I mean, not to say, I mean, I'm not saying like, right or wrong. It's a weird thing to throw in, but still kind of have the audience go with your character. And race is kind of a little bit more of a, I mean, it's always a touchy subject, obviously, but it feels like it'd be a bigger deal. And yeah, it's very casual. And in a way, like that's why it's so, why it works so well also, because it's kind of like, it's even challenging for you if you're watching and you're like, oh, I like this guy. What's going on? Real quick look up. I don't know how true this is, but the common term muli is shortened from melanzana, which means eggplant in Italian. Moulignon is also a combination of muli and hooligan. The reason muli is referred to blacks is because the skin color of eggplant is black. Because I think he does say something about eggplant.
Oh yeah, that made no sense to me. I guess that adds up now.
He does say something like that to Noah, and I think he also says something charcoal briquette, and I guess that's another black thing. I guess that's like how simple it is. It's just how because he's like charcoal briquette. But yeah, it's such a casual, offhand thing and even to Tony, he's putting it in the context of like he thinks he's not racist or not bad because he's like, look, I have associates that are black and they don't want my son dating their daughters and I don't want their sons dating my daughters, you know, separate but equal. It's this weird rationale that he has. And it's such an interesting thing to throw in kind of out of nowhere. And yes, and I guess in the larger context of what's going on where we start getting into these garbage wars and Tony dealing with the passing of his mother.
Yeah, and it's really not super connected to the rest of the episode. I mean, the movie shows up again, but this makes it seem like this character is going to come back because it would be weird to just have this part in it when it's not actually... The fact that he passes out here is not even important to the episode. It's not like in the past where he's had to get a kick like that to get back to Melfi or something like that. Now this is just where it starts, and then it feels like the episode doesn't really start until a bit later when he shows up to his mother's place. And I did write, before I realized it was a Yoda situation, I did write that it felt like a real flashback to season 1, because I was like, what? He's going over to the house now and he's bringing stuff and he's even saying similar lines to what he said in season 1. And then, like, as I realized afterwards, they're like reusing footage and lines that Livia had in the past. So that's why that whole conversation felt so much like a flashback, because they're like literally reusing it.
Well, and plus it's just jarring anyways, where we left off, even though the end of season 2, he did have kind of a showdown with Livia in a way and did have to speak to her here and there. Yes, this is all of a sudden he's showing up with like groceries or whatever. And I guess he does mention, I think, in the previous episode, he mentioned that he has a Russian girl. Actually, it's at the end, yeah, when they're down in the basement. He mentioned he has a Russian lady caring for his mother, and it is his old Guma's like cousin or sister, whoever she is. But yeah, because it's, I guess we're just seeing hints of what we would have seen, but they had to speed it up a bit. Gotta go a little fast forward instead of rewind like earlier in the episode, eh?
And good old Livia is so repetitive that some of the lines, like he brings her, I brought you these books on tape, and her response is, I wish the Lord would take me now. So it's like clearly just cut in from her saying that previously.
Well, and even before that, she's like, why? What happened? Tell me. Like she thinks there's some sort of emergency that he won't say. But yeah, I guess there's fast forwarding because we probably would have seen Tony would have had to put on a happy face and try to be the good son throughout the season just to butter her up so she wouldn't testify against him. But we kind of have to see an abridged version of that because he does mention it in this scene. And yeah, she just has to do her like hanky wave, and then he even has to say like, "Hey, don't wave that hanky at me." He has to because they have to try to connect it the best they can. It's definitely clumsy. And I mean, we're not at the point we are at now, because even now there's still that uncanny valley. Like, I don't know if you've seen Rogue One, but they brought Peter Cushing back from the dead in that, and we even got to see before Carrie Fisher died, we got to see a de-aged version of her CGI person. So I mean, we're still struggling now, and I mean, some scenes look really bad. But hey, you got to give them credit. It's 18 years ago, 17 years ago, and we're already getting there.
Yeah, and apparently it cost $250,000 to do this CGI, which made me think, like, couldn't you literally just reuse footage somehow? Cut it together cleverly? Because she does say, like, now look here, I don't like that kind of talk. Stop it. It upsets me. And that's word for word. Like, even with the CGI, I'm like, that connects in my brain where I've heard her literally say exactly those things before. So I guess it probably wouldn't have worked, but like just use that cut maybe, because it was really weird. But then again, this was 17 years ago. I would never have noticed probably back then.
And I guess the main thing we leave from this is that, yeah, Tony's trying to be a little bit in better graces because of this upcoming trial, and yet another example of Livia's lack of like love or care, because you get these baby books, these grandmother baby books that she hasn't filled out a page on. And I love Tony's reaction. It's like, what the fuck? Oh, they're all blank. Nothing's filled out. Like he's got a surprise. It's almost like surprising that he's surprised by that. But it's just another example for him to kind of mull over on how she is the way she is.
Yeah, and it's I don't know. I'm watching it now. It is sad because it doesn't really work, and what actually does work though is later when he comes in and they're just standing there, his family, and they're like, oh, she's dead. Like that works. That's a Sopranos moment, and this is sort of like we had to put this in because it wouldn't have worked. Well, maybe it would have been just as fine, honestly, if they didn't have this scene. I was about to say it wouldn't have worked, but for me, this scene was really weird and threw me off. So maybe if they just started the episode or whatever with that, it could have worked better.
Yeah. I mean, I guess because most of what we're getting from this episode, and again, it's just another heightened version of what some people deal with in real life, where it's not quite as devastating when someone dies, someone close to you, whether it be a relative or, parent or whatever. Because the whole thing that I'm getting from most of the episode is that Tony is trying to hide the fact that he's not that sad that she died.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess you'd still have that even if they didn't have this small almost reunion, because he would still probably be guilty that he would say, she's dead to me. I don't want her name in this house. But then when she actually does die, you could still play with that. So, yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. There's definitely an argument to be made on if they needed the bad CGI scenes to set that up or not.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. I'm not saying I would have done it any differently, but those 250,000 they could have been spent on, like, I don't know, more explosions probably. Maybe. I'm just saying.
It's weird because that sounds cheap to me for some reason. Even though it's not cheap. I mean, it's $250,000. I don't know what their episode budget is, but maybe it's because I'm so used to these like $180 million movies being made today. I'm like, that's nothing. Flash in the pan.
Yeah, so I'm Swedish. We don't, like, 250,000 is definitely a whole movie budget over here. But yeah, so we move on from that scene and see, like, interspersed throughout this episode, we have to talk about it, the Public Enemy. We watched the whole thing for this very purpose. Everyone at home, did you do your homework? Did you watch the Public Enemy? Does it give you the context of, like, well, I guess he's watching it in a weird order because he just skips to this part and that part, and it's fine. That's how they always do it in the movies. You got to get some movie magic in there, like, oh, they run down this street, then they're on the other side of town. Hey, it's editing. But yes, the Public Enemy, the way it's used, it makes a lot of sense to me because they basically need it to fill in the blanks of his relationship with his mother because he's not saying anything. He's not feeling that much. And she's not in it because she can't be in it, the episode, I mean. So it's a really good choice, and especially like David Chase had said, it's one of his favorite movies and a main inspiration for the character of Livia, or like making it the opposite of that, basically. So it's a really good way to bring in that parallel without saying it too on the nose. So good choice.
Yeah, I mean, I always liked the use of, even though I'd never seen the movie until we just watched it for the podcast, but I always kind of liked the use of it. And I think even kind of now seeing it, like you mentioned it out of order, I'm almost positive like he sees the end. Like the first thing we see is like the end title. Because I think they use that in place of the actual like beginning disclaimer. I could be wrong, but I feel like he first sees the one where it's like, it's up to us to stop this problem. And that's actually like the very end from what I remember. But it's a the obviously artistic license, and the reasoning why, because we see the way Tony, because Tony's like laughing and kind of enjoying the more gangsterish parts and the just the character being a gangster like Tony, and then it gets to obviously more of an emotional climax for Tony by the end.
Yeah. And so he goes out and moves the water sprinklers, and then he comes in and his whole family's there, and they tell him what's happened. That's when it clicked for me, like, oh shit. It was still a shock somehow, even though I figured out that it was CGI. I don't know why I was thinking like, oh, that was a weird choice. Why would they do that? but she's dead. She was
Well,
dead.
and yeah, and at this point too, as well, like intercut with it, or like just before it, Meadow does come in. She knows something's up, and Tony's kind of still giving her an attitude, like you better just decide to walk up those stairs. And we did kind of gloss over it, but I do like, because Tony has the scene like we're talking about where he's just basically being racist right to the kid's face. But then when Carmela comes in, it's not like they give Carmela an out. Like she never says she disagrees with him. She just says, "Let me handle it." So I kind of like that they leave it like that, where it's not like the other characters are like, "Oh my god, goodness, how could you?" It's more like she's on the same page, but like, you're handling this wrong. Let me handle this. And then we see some of that because when he's still being Tony to her when she comes in and she's like, Noah's being quiet. What did you say to him? And then Carmela's like, Meadow, can you please come up here? I need to talk to you. Then, yeah, like we said, he goes out, moves the sprinklers, comes back in and gets the news. And Meadow has that conflict because she's still mad at her dad, but she's still sad her grandmother died and sad for how her dad's feeling about it. And even Tony, like, I mean, he talks about it later when he's with Melfi, but Gandolfini's playing it great because you can kind of feel everything he's feeling. Is that you kind of see there's this weird sense of relief and then kind of a put on of how he feels like he should react. So like, your grandmother loved you. She loved you. She loved you so much or whatever.
Yeah.
And there is just this conflicting feeling like, well, this is my mom that died, but also my mom like made my life shitty and kind of this is good for me.
Yeah. And so they go to the house and have a drink with Svetlana. And she just says the titular line, "Goodbye, little Livia." And more discussion of these books, these journal books that she never touched, much to everyone's surprise. And then we get, I wanted to say about this next scene with Anthony Jr. He's reading the poem, the Robert Frost poem, and that's when I felt like, okay, now it's like, why are you putting in another thing? Because it's great when you take a cultural thing, you draw a parallel to what's going on in your own story, and you're already doing that really great with The Public Enemy, and then you have to get Robert Frost up in the mix, which is a great poem, and also one of the most used poems in media ever. Like, it's in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, it's in every show and everything, and I don't blame people because I love that poem. It's a great one, but I assume it's just because people are forced to read it in high school, so then they remember it when they make movies or something, because, it doesn't add that much considering that we're already drawing parallels to another cultural thing, and this is just sort of thrown in to give AJ and Meadow a scene.
I kind of like it, though. I mean, I don't really disagree with anything you're saying as far as, like, the usage, and maybe it's a bit on the nose, and it is, like, it is a way that they just spell it out, but it makes complete sense that they would spell it out because it is almost for the AJs out there watching the show. We haven't touched on this yet too much, but I think one of the best things about The Sopranos is that, and again, I'm not trying to say like we're great or whatever, because I'm sure other people have even better. No, they don't. They don't have better insights in The Sopranos than we do. But I'm just saying one of the great things about The Sopranos, you could just watch it as a gangster show and who gives a fuck and be kind of annoyed by episodes like this because you want to see the whackings and the mafia life and all that, and you don't give a shit about any of this other stuff. So sometimes they do want to spell that out a bit, and I think it's a good use of the character of AJ, and I guess I just like the moment it gets where he's like kind of spooked by himself and like asks like grandma, like when he's looking out in the empty house.
Yeah.
I mean, I still have moments like that as a grown man where you're in the house by yourself and it's dark and you hear something, you're like, what the fuck? What the fuck was that? So I don't know. I kind of like it. I do. Everything you said, though, I can't argue against. Like what you're saying is also very true.
But Jim, black is death, not white.
Yeah, but I thought black was death. What is this? Oh, so it's a Thanksgiving poem.
Like yeah, I guess
the woods.
I guess I like the way you explained it, though, too. That it's kind of doing what the Public Enemy stuff is doing, but a bit more on Front Street. And it even has a character, like I thought originally, I thought like having a character explain the thing in the thing is a bit over the top. But then on the other hand, if you see this scene as them laying it out clearly for the viewers, it's almost like we got a double explanation going on where Meadows doing to AJ what the Sopranos is doing to us, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, I know I'm like starting to sound pretty elitist about how I watch The Sopranos, but I mean,
we do have a podcast, Jim. So yes,
but I'm in some Sopranos groups, and then just even like growing up, you know, when Sopranos was a big deal, like there are people that are like, that Moulignan Noah, like there are people that, you know, watch those scenes and they're like, go Tony, like you're kicking ass, dude. I don't want no Moulignan with my daughter either, and I mean, it you know, it just is what it is. Some people don't always read into it maybe what you're supposed to.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So then we got scenes with Tony calling his sisters. I guess actually the scene where they have a drink with Svetlana is actually later. I got it a bit mixed up, but anyway, there's just a cascade of scenes of people saying the same things to Tony, which is what happens when anyone dies. You just, you know, you say your condolences and you say this and that, and the line they use the most and very effectively in the episode is like, at least she didn't suffer, which is said here and there. And I love the way it's said towards the end where Tony's just like, fuck this, and walks out of there, because it's just such a pointless nothing thing to say.
Which is, it's good because I like that it's not really using that in a way to show that those people are shitty for only saying the same thing, because it's hard to know what to say to someone when someone close to them died. And then you throw in the fact that everyone knows that Livia Soprano was kind of a shitty person, but no one knows if it's okay to say it. So yeah, like they are empty platitudes, but I don't feel like it's used in a way to make it seem like everyone's dumb for doing it. It's just kind of like, this is hard enough as is, never mind on someone like this. And yeah, and then if you are on the receiving end, that's all that happens. You just hear the same shit and you just kind of get annoyed with it. You understand people are trying to be nice, but then it's also like, all right, shut the fuck up, fuck you. No,
and Tony just has to do the same thing of like, oh, I have to figure out responses like, oh yeah, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, he says it so many times. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, and then you shrug, and then it's like you wait for someone else to say that she didn't suffer, and so on. And I mean, that's the thing. It's like most of the episode is that of like fakeness, and then when they start like everything crashes in the at the wake, or whichever it is, the reception afterwards, however you call it, when everything goes to shit, and then it's like after that they still have to like go back to pretending that everything's fine again, because you gotta. So before we get to there's some bits and pieces where we do get to see Tony's sisters, both of them again, and he has to call up and say, you're not coming to your own mother's fucking funeral. And Janice, I really thought that was her son that she was giving like eggs to or whatever, but it was her fiance, I guess. So.
Yeah, dude, I love that, because I think I always just kind of thought the same thing too. I never gave it a second thought, but then when you realize she's talking about how her son is a street person now, that's just a fiance or a boyfriend or something. But it's just this young kid. It's such a Janice thing. What a great detail.
Yeah, and I mean, she comes back and she's like, I'm gonna move into this house now. So I'm like, what happened to your fiance?
Yeah,
because you're not bringing him.
Well, it's good because it's kind of just another, like, Janice is just always on to the next. Like, that was the racket she was doing for a little while, but this could prove to be more fruitful. So this is the better option to go with. And a real quick call out, it's just a small detail, but I'm always a fan of when AJ is hanging out with Tony's crew, like by themselves. Like there's that moment when he had to go to the dance and they were sitting in the limo, and there's just a quick shot here where he's watching skateboarding and eating ice cream, and then like Syl, Paulie, and Christopher are there, and I almost kind of my own fill in the blanks, like, yeah, they showed up to pay their respects, but also AJ was getting scared by himself, so he needed someone there, and now he feels better because he's not alone in the house.
Yeah, it's a good point. So we get more scenes from the movie The Public Enemy, and we get the famous grapefruit in the face scene. Tony's there loving it,
Oh yeah.
of course. um, and then like I was trying to think since I was thinking when we were doing it, what scenes are they going to use? They use the grapefruit in the face. They use the basic mob stuff to set it up when he's like slapping around a guy. Oh, you're gonna take bear from us, or you're not gonna take it from no one.
Yeah.
And then him giving money to his mother, and then like a lot of scenes concerning the mother, of course.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We start to see a little bit. Yeah. When he's giving money to his mother, and then the brother comes in and doesn't want it, and of course the grapefruit scene. And yeah, it is nice because it is like this progression. It's just Tony's very happy watching this movie, and then he's kind of happy, and then yeah, he's in tears.
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, you got your sister sobbing. Tony can't sleep. Yeah, grapefruit scene. Oh, and then we see a quick shot of the feds, who they kind of like. It is interesting that they're just hanging out listening to all of this. And there's like a quick moment, and I believe I read on Wikipedia the guy's reading the Internet for Dummies. I guess another detail, and yeah, he has to tell the other dude like, "Oh, his mother died last night," and there's almost like a little empathy there, but then it's also just kind of some juicy gossip they got from listening in on the Soprano family.
Yeah, and I mean they put on their headphones. I think they hear him whistling. Like that's part
Yeah,
of the
that's
goof
right.
of his is like walking down because he has to put on a front of like what he's supposed to be feeling. But when no one's around, he doesn't have to do that. But the FBI is always around. So anyway, a bunch of mob people show up, and he brings them out. Doesn't bring them to the basement. Good thinking, Tony. Brings them to the pool now. Because
Because they
very
are
luckily.
discussing crimes, so it does.
Oh yeah. They're just discussing the hell out of these crimes. I imagine you could just get like a satellite microphone, like a really directional microphone, like a super long boom, and you could probably pick up on what they're saying through those trees. But yeah, they're apparently these people are like torching each other's trucks. And again, this is like, I guess this is more how mob stuff works, because when you think of mob conflict, you think of like rival families going at it, but no, it's just like within the mob. It's like, oh, he torched mine, so I torched his.
Yeah, it seems like it's kind of a fall off of what we started to get introduced to at the end of last season, because we meet Ralph Cifaretto, who's played by Joey Pantoliano, or whatever his name is. You know, he was in The Matrix and some other movies.
He's
so now,
new, right?
yes, he's new. This is where we first meet Ralphie.
Yeah.
But we learn basically that Ralphie's kind of trying to take over Richie's crew.
Right.
If we remember, Richie was arguing with Albert's crew over these new routes that are opening up, or whatever it is, because it's always pretty vague on what these specifics are. So it is kind of a weird extension of that. Like, they have set it up a little bit, but they don't bother getting into all the specifics. But yeah, they're firebombing each other's trucks and dumpsters. And there's this other guy who runs like the recycle division that's threatening to maybe, open up his yap and spill the beans, if you will.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We see it later. I mean, basically, one guy threatened to go hand them all in. So Tony's like, "Well, you deal with that then, because that's more important." I love the line when they pull up on that and like, "Hey, remember, no fires," when they're beating the shit out of him. That's great. So they go see the funeral director, and they don't want a funeral. So, but then they do. That's that scene, basically.
Well, it's great because it's all like it's classic Janice, because at first Janice doesn't want to go. And then, she tries to make the excuse of like her, maybe I shouldn't be in New Jersey because of what happened. And Tony's like, oh, that's old news by now. It'd be better if you even showed up. This is your own mother. But then immediately when she shows up, she's crying and can't handle it. And then when they mention that the mom didn't want a service, now Janice is the first to speak up and be like, I don't know if I'm okay with that. And then it like pushes Barb over as well. Now Barb's looking at Tony as well. Like, what would people say? What should we do? And then it turns into finally Tony being like, fine, do it up. Do the whole thing. Just send me the bill. And now here we are. We're going to have a great big funeral for Livia Soprano.
Yes. Or I guess Yeah, they do have the big funeral. That one's barely a scene, the actual funeral, because we just get the classic FBI taking pictures, snapping pics. The funeral in itself isn't.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because we have the wake beforehand, and I mean, I like how just but like in this scene though beforehand with the funeral director is he is selling, but he even tries to say he's not because
Yeah.
it's kind of like a weird to me the way I read it anyways, a weird manipulation of like, so what did we want to do for Ma? Like kind of like he's a son,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like it's our mom. What are we gonna do?
Yeah, it felt really gross the way it was like, we brought mom here last night. Like,
Yeah.
I guess that's selling language. ABC always be closing. But it really creeped me out. I don't think Tony liked it either.
And then I like when they leave because then Janice is like, "Look, Tony, this is not all going to be on you. I'm going to do some artwork for the program, and I'm going to make sure I get everyone in the room to all share a memory about Ma." And then even Tony's like, "No, we're not going to do that California shit.
Yes.
People want to have to come in and have some gabagool. That's fine, but we'll leave it at that." And of course, Janice is not going to listen, as we'll find out later.
Yes, and we get a quick scene with Melfi. There wasn't one last episode, was there? I mean, we were in the FBI perspective. So get back to Melfi, and it's a good one. It's short, but it gives him a chance to actually not say the same bullshit over and over, because the scene starts with him going like, "What? You're not gonna say condolences or whatever?" But then he's like, "Actually, that's great because everyone's saying the same bullshit, and and he gets into how he feels that he must be a bad son. What sort of person wishes their parent to be dead? I must be a bad son. And he says that that's the worst thing in the world to be. So we get really into his sort of hatred that is there. Because he says that's a fucking disgusting thing to be, but that's all brought about by his weird twisted relationship that he had with his mother. So it's a good scene to actually get to lay some of that stuff out and not just have it in the subtext of the episode.
Yes, and it's another opportunity to kind of rebuild the character of Melfi after they destroyed our confidence in her in season 2, because she just doesn't say anything. She just listens and lets Tony talk, and it's the best thing that she could do. Like, she doesn't say anything, even when he's like, yes, no, sorry, no condolences, and she still doesn't give him even an inch of okay, well, I am sorry your mother died or something. She just sits and stares at him, and then he kind of he goes off on his thing. I'm glad she's dead. You know what? I wish she was dead. And when I heard she died, relief flooded through my veins. And he mentions how he had his trial coming up, and of course, because Melfi also knows, she's been with Tony now for what, I guess if we go real time, it's coming up on about 3 years, and she's been trying to push him to face some of the realities of the relationship with his mother. But Tony still has that, like anyone would. It's still your parent. It's still your mother. So I think it all plays out really well. And yeah, the way your son up in Bard, he better be a good son, right? I just love the way he says it, because it's just such a weird line. Like, he should be a good son. Because it's just that thing you feel like, am I a good son? Am I a good mother? Am I a good brother? Whatever it might be, you have this, morality in your head, and if you're against it, you're gonna feel bad about it.
Yeah, I also loved how the scene ended. His line at the end is like, "So we're probably done here, right? She's dead." Like, that was he was there to talk about his mother, and now he's like, "Oh, so we're done with this now." And that's not how that works, Tony. So I believe we will have Melfi appear in at least one more episode before the finale, because he probably still has some shit to work out. So by the way, next scene, quick shot of this capo, who is apparently another fucking snitch. We got rats all over the place.
Yeah, another. I had to look it up again because I forgot his name, but yeah, Raymond Ray Curto. It's very nonchalantly just introduced that he's also an informant, and it's a nice kind of play against what we went through season 2 with Big Pussy, of him kind of going back and forth, being wishy-washy, not sure where his allegiance should go. And this guy's just immediately like, "Should I wear a wire?" And they're like, "Ah, yeah."
He offers it.
Yeah.
He contacts them to talk, and they're like, "Yeah, sure, why not? You need new batteries?"
Yeah.
And I've seen this guy around. I haven't seen the Ralphie, this new guy. I haven't seen him around, but this guy has been in the show. I think
Mhm.
since season 1, I've seen him here and there. And now
Yeah,
I'm
we
like, you bastard.
Yeah, we saw him more in season 1 because he was like, yeah, when they had those like capo meetings with even like
Yeah.
Jimmy and actually, was it not Jimmy then? It was Raymond the whole time.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't think they know either.
Yeah. Yeah, so then Janice, of course, is hammering around in the basement looking for buried gold in the house. And I don't know if that's something that's, like, because they did build that up a bit in season 2. I don't know if that's going to have, like, a payoff or if it's just a fun goof at this point. But either way, Tony and her get to have a nice little chat in the basement where, yeah. What are they even talking about here? Oh yeah, she's upset that it's all his stuff that she saved.
Yeah, which is another interesting, because I mean, where we get to by the end of this episode is, you know, Tony seeing that even Tommy, the public enemy, has a mother that loves him no matter what, and you know, Tony doesn't have that, or even like a chance to have that anymore now that his mother's dead. But then this weird thing of how she did save some of his stuff, like, does that mean that there maybe was a chance if he had just worked a little harder to change who she was? I mean, clearly, I don't think he could have, but as far as what Tony's thinking.
Hmm. I don't know. I think it is clear that he was the favorite out of the three, despite, you know, despite everything. He was the one who was around, and she would spit poison at anyone who was close to her, but she still, I think, desired people to be close to her. And he was the one who did that. He was the only one who acted like her child and who felt this need to satisfy, well, these, you know, needs that she had of like, I need to put someone down. He like willingly made himself someone who could take her abuse for a long time.
Yeah,
And hey, that's as good as love if you're Olivia Soprano.
very true. Very true. Then we're at the actual funeral, or no, not the funeral, the wake.
Yeah.
And we see Jackie Jr. again, and he's just kind of, oh, hey, T, sorry. And you know, his mom has to kind of apologize for him. We see kind of like a montage of people. Silvio's annoyed he has to go because it's the Jets opening game. This is bullshit. Furio, Adriana, and Chris are all doing drugs because it's like, hey, anything to get you through these events. Like, it's tough going to a funeral, you know?
Yeah. And I always think of how they're really like falling into these drugs, but then Furio's there too, and I'm kind of like, I guess it's fine. Furio's there, so you know, whatever. It's just the standard thing we do around these parts, I guess, with the drugs. But that's a good montage because it really shows like behind the scenes of this fakeness that the whole episode is. Like, we know Tony's not really sincere in what he's doing, but this is really showing that none of these people are really sincere, except probably Junior, who shows up and is like crying and talking about how they're dropping like fucking flies, man, and it's all that charcoal broiled meat. Nobody told us it was bad.
But I also think, but what they're showing us as well, that even Junior, it's more about him thinking that he's gonna die now because everyone from his generation is dropping, and it's more. I mean, not that I'm saying he's not upset that she passed away, but from what my understanding of Junior Soprano is, it kind of does come back to him as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and he goes and pinches AJ's cheek really hard, and tries to talk to Carmilla, who's having none of it. She won't be that fake, at least. And yeah, they have a bit of talk as well about you know, the whole mob business and all the trucks getting set on fire and everything, and how he says to Tony that like, the economy's good, we're in an upswing, that's, you get all the credit for that, you don't even doing anything.
Yeah, Chinks and housewives are betting football, he says.
Yep.
And he is talking about Ralphie in the scene as well, saying that Ralphie's a good earner. and that he should be in line for Richie's spot. And Tony has to point out like 3 months ago. So like he does give a time frame. It's been 3 months basically since season 2, because he's like 3 months ago. You thought Richie was like next in line, like even for. I mean, he doesn't specifically say it, but basically like even for Tony's spot in a way. And then we cut to from that. We see when Ralphie and his crew roll up and beat up the recycling dude because no fires.
Yeah, and as far as time frame, Tony also said that for a year I didn't talk to you in the scene with Livia, which tells us that I guess they consider season 2 to be 1 year, which makes me think, okay, a season is a year more or less. So we're there, like you said. And then there's the actual funeral where they put her in the ground, and Svetlana and Janice get into a bit of an argument about these show tune records. Where Svetlana's not going to go with any of Janice's bullshit. I'm going to have to respect her wishes.
And yeah, well, I like that we get the impression that Svetlana is kind of a smarter Janice here.
Yeah.
Like, handling it a little bit better, because even just the fact of like how she wants her out of the house too. And it's like, well, Tony said, I could stay here until we get a house because her fiance has time with his kids or whatever the story is. And it's like, oh, yeah, she give the vinyl collection to me. I know, ask her. And actually right before that too, we do see Tony watching the I Ain't So Tough scene. And
yeah,
Tony's not, he's not quite as like happily watching the Public Enemy like he was in the earlier, like push a grapefruit in a woman's face scene.
Yeah. And then we get an actual flashback of her of Livia spilling the beans about what Tony did to Artie's restaurant, to sort of, and that's a flashback in his mind because we go back into Artie staring into space, remembering what Livia did, and they play with this a little bit where like Artie's all upset and he's throwing trash bags around a bit later, and he's talking shit to Tony like, oh, guess it's just you and me who know the secret now. But in the grand scheme of things, I know it's important to you, Artie, but like your restaurant wasn't that important and you got a better one now, so like calm down. Also, you tried to kill Tony and he didn't kill you in retaliation, so maybe chill a bit with all your throwing shit around.
Yeah, it definitely feels like this is more of a remnant of that they wanted to revisit this eventually. Like they wanted this to come back. And now that they don't have this character, like this is kind of their last chance to play with it in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
But it's also just kind of Artie's always a little pathetic. And it's just another person, I guess, making it about themselves in a way. Like we kind of see this through the whole episode, that how someone else is deaf, but everyone's using it in their own like selfish way. Because now Artie's thinking about how she gave him that information about the restaurant. Yeah, he's having a little, bratty tantrum about it, kind of. And in a way, I guess it's like we're being dismissive of him because it's like we love Tony, so it's like fuck you, Artie. But in reality, even if you end up with an insurance, like the insurance claim helps you get a new restaurant, there's still a lot of time. We weren't there with Artie when he was uncertain and he had his shitty house he had to fix up, and they had the pest control out at the new Vesuvio's because they were concerned. So a lot of stress that he had to deal with as far as in his own world.
Yes, well, calm down, Artie, I will still say. Like, or only just because I know you're friends with Tony and you have been all your life, but like, don't. I guess it's fine. I mean, it's not a big deal or anything. It's just funny that he is actually breaking through the fakeness. He's the first to do that, I guess, because they're both just outside. But it's almost like they build up this veneer of everything being fake, and then he pierces through it. Which, it's an interesting choice. Anyways, I think it's like you said, they wanted to do something more with it. Now, when I figured out when she died, I had to look at the Wikipedia because I was like, okay, so when did she actually die? When did the episode come out? And that's when I happened to read about Big Pussy's cameo on the trivia. So I did. I don't know if I would have caught it or not because I actually looked. Beforehand? Yeah,
dude.
Yeah,
you gotta wait till the episode's done to look up stuff. Are you serious? What about spoilers, my dude?
I had to find out when she died and when the episode came out, and then I had a quick look at the trivia. I didn't look at the plot, but yes, because I felt like I'd gotten the big spoiler that would have been in the episode. But yeah, that was a mistake. I'm sure I would have caught it because they hang on it. It's when he opens a cabinet or whatever, and in the mirror, Big Pussy's just standing there, and it's interesting because it's like he after that he sort of looks off like he maybe saw something,
Yep.
but the mirror is on the other side, so it's not like he closes it and there's a flash of him, but I suppose it's like we're in his mind. It's another really interesting choice they made.
Yeah, it's weird because I'm trying to remember. I don't feel. Let me just put it up real quick because it does when you know it's there. It feels like they hang on it forever.
Yeah.
And it's so obvious. But I kind of feel like I didn't notice it until I had heard about it or saw something on the internet about it. And now it's just clear as day. Yeah, Tony opens like it's like a cabinet or a bar in the wall, and there's a mirror on there, and you see, Big Pussy in the reflection. And then it does cut to, yeah, it cuts to like a wider scene. Let me pull it up just so they kind of show that there's no one there, and Tony looks. But I guess they're showing it's more like, well, I mean, the obvious thing is, yeah, he's still being haunted by killing his friend. So not even that Tony would happen to have seen it like we see it. It's more like we're seeing what he's being haunted by or what he's feeling, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's more like a specter of death. He wished his own mother to be dead. He wished Pussy to be dead. I mean, he wished he didn't have to kill him too. But yeah, I'm sorry because it would have been a really good sort of sample of is it noticeable or not. And I feel like in today's age with pausing and going back, like I'm almost constantly like if something catches my eye, I'll just get back and have a look and have a pause. So it would have been different if it was on a TV and it's just going past, and when it's over, it's over. Like if you watch a show like that, it is different.
Well, plus, I mean, when you're watching a show, knowing like you're watching it to discuss it, it's probably a little bit different than like, oh, hey, I'm, binge watching The Sopranos. You know what I mean? But yeah, it is weird. Like, it seems like it's so obvious, but I kind of imagine it could easily slip by. Real quick, and before that, I mean, they do have a quick scene where we show Meadow kind of playing her part and just saying like, oh, thank you so much for your condolences. Thank you for being here. And Tony's commenting on how her innocence is gone and she's just a fake robot like the rest of us. And there's a scene previous to that when they're at the wake and she's looking at Tony talking to the assemblyman and the reverend. And I don't know if she's just thinking like, he's talking to a black guy, but I thought he doesn't like black guys. Like I'm trying to figure out like why they show that, because she's like watching him in a weird way. So I don't know. What's your read on that?
The look she gave, I can't remember, but I did think of like, oh, these characters are here. Although, have we seen the Assemblyman before? Is that someone who's been around?
We maybe haven't seen maybe we saw him once. I'm trying to remember. I feel like he's vaguely familiar. I mean, obviously, the Reverend had that episode where they even directly referenced it, I believe. Like, we talked about how this day may come because his father passed away in the episode he was in.
Yeah, I just took it as sort of him, like, or this wake being used more for, like, connections than it's being used for mourning. Like, that's how I saw that. But it was interesting that to have those characters just pop in and shake hands. And I honestly didn't even think of, like, I'd forgotten about Noah at this point. Like, I forgot about everything before Olivia passed away. So I wasn't thinking so much about Meadow's point of view.
But yeah, I mean, either way, it kind of connects because it's like she's watching Tony, and then later Tony's watching her, but then she catches his eye and kind of gives him those Manson lamps of hers.
Yes.
Because, she's still upset with her dad, even with everything going on. And one of the moments I really like going on around all this between the Meadow scene and then the Big Pussy haunting Tony is we have that scene where Hesh is telling a joke, and then everyone starts laughing, and then Tony comes up and they all kind of stop. And then we even see Rosalie telling a joke in the kitchen as well. And I've talked about this in the past on my show, Jim and Them, because I remember going to my grandparents' funerals years ago. And they're kind of the first funerals I've went to where I was like more like aware of what's going on. Because I think when I was like real young, maybe I went to like one of my other grandparents' funerals or something. But you're just a kid, you don't know what's going on. But when I went more as an adult, there were these moments where like my grandparents were in the wake, and we're just sitting in this room with an open casket, and then people are coming in, and it's you've seen it in movies, maybe you've done it in real life. It is kind of that. People come in, they shake your hand, they say sorry for your loss, you go through the whole rigmarole. But when you're there the whole time, there would be moments where like everything's quiet, and then it's kind of like some murmurs as people start talking to people next to them, and then it gets a little louder as you start just conversing, and then almost to the point where it's like a party, like not quite a party, but the sound of a party, because now everyone's openly talking and you're talking to the group because you're family or your friends. And then there'll be a moment where you kind of have a realization like, oh wait, this is awake, and then it hushes down again.
Yeah.
And like 20 minutes later it starts up again. It's like
oh no, yeah, that's what I said. oh shit, it's awake.
So I kind of love those little details. And even going back to the detail early in the episode when Tony drives up to his mother's house and the ambulance pulls away, and then he's watching the ambulance because it's such a big deal to him. And then there are people like walking their dogs or just out and about for like a leisurely stroll. And it's that, I love that take on how to someone a big thing just happened, but to everyone else it's like, oh, an ambulance just drove by.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can relate a lot to that, especially like, not to get too personal, but my mother passed away earlier this year, like only like 3 months ago or whatever, so it's fairly fresh. And there is that, like, when you're walking around and like a big fucking thing just happened to you, but to everyone else, it's like, nah, I'm getting gas, You're like,
yeah.
How the fuck are you getting gas right now? Don't you understand what just happened? So I love those little touches, and you have to feel like it shows great writing, and probably, I mean, whether it be David Chase or other people in the writers room, there's authenticity there where, people have been through these events, and you kind of pick up these little moments and you put it in there.
Yeah. And I have my quibbles with this episode, especially like the early parts of the episode. It sort of feels a bit weird and dreamlike, like it doesn't center me enough. It doesn't like feel real at the start, but then those moments you're describing are so real. And in general, the way it's directed and edited, it is disjointed at times. It doesn't have the sure hand that we're sort of used to, in my opinion. There's several shots, I think, where they visibly like slowed it down for one reason or another for the edit. At least that's how I'm not sure. I didn't look into it or anything, but like it just felt like the frame rate was different because they're cutting in a weird way, and then some cuts are really fast and some are really slow, not in the way they would usually do it. But those things you mentioned bring the episode up, and then the next scene that we're gonna get into, the big scene in when Janice brings everyone in, is such a great scene. It's so amazing. That's like a play. Like, just have that as an episode with all the different aspects, with the line from the beginning of the rambling that starts out as like, oh, this seems so deep, and then it's like, oh, he's really high. That's great. And just the way Janice is directing the conversation where no one wants to get pointed out. It's like the teacher pointing at you to give the assignment, and then the camera even does like whoosh over to the person she's pointing out, and no one really wants to talk. And it's all this awkwardness throughout the episode, and the way it's the tension even builds, and then it finally cracks and crashes. Such a great scene.
Yeah, and going back to like some of the disjointed stuff like you're mentioning, and I completely agree. I have to wonder, and again, I don't know if David Chase or if they've talked about this at all, but I have to wonder if some of those things were just in place that they already wanted to do. Like, they wanted to touch on Tony's racism. They obviously this garbage war was always going to be a thing. And then it was just when they had to kind of pull an audible and figure out what they wanted to do with the Olivia Soprano. Like, it almost was there was a real person that died, but the way it just threw like a monkey wrench into your plans, kept some other things. You're like, all right, well, we could still leave this here and kind of have it play out, but then we'll throw in this. It's all speculation, but I have to wonder what was already in place that they just decided to keep there and then add all this new stuff. But you're right. When it builds to this crescendo. It's so perfect, and it's such a great blend of what we've been discussing over season 1 and 2 of how well they can handle comedy on this show. Because I mean, it's obviously dark humor, but it's played so perfect, and but it feels grounded and real in a lot of ways too. Because yeah, like it is like being called on by the teacher, and you don't want to be called on because it's like, oh no, don't ask me. Like she calls Hesh first, and Hesh just has to say like, she didn't mince words. Yeah, one thing I could say, like, she didn't have, I forget his exact phrasing, but something between the mind and the mouth or whatever he says. And then she calls on AJ, and he's like, I don't know. And AJ's kind of being the realist there because he's so dumb anyway, so he doesn't know how to be anything else. And Carmilla has to be like, leave him alone, Janice. And this is exactly what Tony didn't want. But here we are, we're stuck in it. And yeah,
and then there's a voice that's just like, she was my best friend. And the way they show it visually is so great, of everyone sort of leaning in, and then like Furio has to like, huh, what? Turn around, and it's just revealed. That's good visual storytelling.
It's so good because yeah, it's almost like no one knew that person. I mean, no one knew the person was in the room, and they're even just, people are just blatantly standing in front of her, like, so all she sees are these people's backs. She's in a corner. And then even it's weird because there's that moment and it's clearly a joke, but again, I'm a member of these Facebook groups and stuff, which some people add great insight, and there's a lot of good discussion. But a common thing I see are people ask the question, who's that guy behind Tony on the stairs? And it's like, don't you get that's the joke, is that a guy like was up there going to the bathroom or something, and he came downstairs and saw what was going on, and he's like, fuck this, and goes back upstairs. But some people are like, oh, it must have been an extra that messed up and they left it in. It's like, no, that's clearly just a good joke. That's just a good scene. And yeah, like another visual gag to throw in to kind of heighten the awkwardness and how everyone's aware of this dumb situation they're stuck in. But it's weird that people want to look for meaning. They want to think it's like some character that we don't know, or a happy accident that they decided to keep into the scene. But no, it's just a funny goof. And I was just, one last thing. I was just,
go ahead.
Where things kind of got into, a few years later, where awkward humor like The Office and stuff like that became so big. But The Sopranos just nailing it already.
I think I was just going to add, I think that might be because, if I'm remembering it right, he's out of focus.
Yeah.
Because that makes it feel like the eye of the audience doesn't focus in on it, so then it's not intentional, but that's makes it better. It's exactly like you said. I did think first like, wait, what was that? But then, like you said, it's clearly just like, I don't want to be like, fuck this. I guess I'll go number 2. I went number 1. I could go 2. Just heading back to the bathroom. And what you mentioned about AJ is interesting because when Tony was talking about Meadow saying that she's become like a robot, it's very clear that AJ's not at that point, which is why he's so pure. He's still innocent. He still is like, what is this, a Thanksgiving song? Which puts the previous scene into a bit more context.
Yeah, and then going back to it's even great too, because the lady that's like, she was my best friend, and her reasoning is like, if anyone got sick or died, I could always count on her to call me up and let me know. And then no, it couldn't be. I was almost going to say, is that the lady she ran over? But no, I don't think it was. That would have been a great little
was it?
Yeah,
but was it though?
I'm not sure. I mean, maybe I'd have to double check.
And if so, is that why she's in a wheelchair?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. What if it is? But yeah, but at the same time, it's nice because all these people are in this mob story, and then this character, it's like they're revealing a side of Livia that we weren't privy to. But then also, it's like you said, it's like she would always call if someone died. Like, it's not the greatest reason, but still, it's like something more to this character that we weren't aware of, and it's a bit sad.
Yep. And I even love Janice's thing. What she's like, as you all are aware, I'm quite a visual artist, and my mother, she wouldn't let me rest on those laurels. And then it just the end of her story is that she's the reason why I make videos today. And it's like, I know I think one of her first episodes when she leaves the party early, it's because of a video with a guy.
Yeah.
And that's the only other time I remember that coming up. And I just love that. But I also believe Janice that she thinks, no, she makes videos. Like, that's her gig. She doesn't work at that car shop or whatever it was with her like 20-year-old fiance that we see earlier in the episode. She's a videographer. She's an artist. And it's great because anytime we see her, there's never anything like that, because she's just that type of person that would portray that to everyone else and even believe it on the inside. But really, she's just kind of a small-time schemer for the most.
So you relate to Janice in this?
Yeah.
I relate to Janice in this. I make videos. Like, it's such a 2018 thing to say as well. Like, oh, that's why I make videos. I'm like, oh my god, this could so be today, except even more so because everyone makes videos.
Absolutely. And then, yeah, like you said, it does come to that kind of full circle moment where then finally someone, and I'm not even sure what character.
Carmilla. It's Carmilla who actually breaks it all and is like, what a crock of shit.
I mean, before that, when just the random lady goes, well, she didn't suffer for that.
Yeah.
Grateful. And that's like Tony just is like, fuck this. And he gets the hell out of there. And Christopher starts going off. I love how the Christopher moment starts with him talking about no people can be exactly the same. And then we cut to outside when Artie has his breakdown with Tony and talks about how he has a story he should go in there and tell. And then when we cut back, Christopher is still going on about how there could be another Livia Soprano. Yeah. And yes, you're right. Then when Artie's about to kind of come in with his truth, Carmilla breaks it up in a perfect way.
Yeah, and they show, like, I guess it makes sense because they show a lot of shots previous to this where she's just emptying her glass over and over. It's almost comical how many times they cut to that. Like, like you would cut to, like, a reaction shot or whatever. She's just drinking all the time to get her to this point. But yeah, she just starts going off over how dysfunctional she was and how she didn't spread any cheer. And then her parents get into it as well. Like, her mother actually says, be quiet, but then her father gets up and starts talking about how, oh, I speak if I want, who are you? Minister of propaganda? We suffered for years under the yoke of that woman. Well, and no one's like, these people are being unreasonable. They're like, yeah, that sounds right.
And because we do know that basically they didn't show up until the second season because they wouldn't come around until Livia was out of the picture. And it is, yeah, it's a nice moment because Carmilla's finally coming clean. And it would make sense, even her mother just wants to keep things polite because it's someone's funeral. So you'd kind of think it's not the time or place. But yeah, I love how her father comes in. And then Carmilla has to point out, like, you know, from beyond the grave, even this woman, you know, has this control. And especially how her kids, they ignored her wishes to not have a service because she didn't think anyone would come. She knew there was a problem. It's such a great way to kind of spell everything out at the end, and kind of through this awkwardness and through this standard routine of having a funeral, a wake, a reception, whatever it might be. And then we get to this like truthful moment where, yeah, no one's going to argue it because everyone knows it's true.
Yeah. And then all Artie has to say after that is that there's dessert in the dining room if you want. So, and his wife is like, and the dessert is all from our restaurant, which you can visit any day of the week, basically, making it a bit of an advertisement.
Our new pastry chef.
Yes. And the episode ends with, the ending of the Public Enemy.
Yep, yeah. Tony's watching the end, and I think they do play a little bit with some of the edit. I think, I mean, maybe I'm just remembering it wrong, where they kind of have a few more cuts to the mother intercut with the death of Tommy. And to me, like, now seeing it and everything, and kind of knowing what they're going for. I mean, maybe I always knew this, but it just seemed more spelled out in my head now. Is that, I mean, clearly Tony's seeing a mother that he never had. Even to someone who's like as bad as him, and it's got a nice connection with the, like, I ain't so tough. Like, it would almost be so on the nose if Tony just did say that out loud as he's watching it. But it's like, you know, Tony starts crying because it's not even so much that his mother died. It's just that the fact that she died means there is no chance of that ever happening, because it does seem like Tony always was fighting that fight. Like he could make things right. He could somehow fix his mother, fix their relationship. But now it's like, no, now it's a no-go. There's not even that sliver of opportunity that was there in the past, even when he wasn't talking to her. But I think it all works. I think it's a nice use of the film throughout the episode, and a nice way to finally get Tony to have shed a few tears over what happened.
It is a shame that this is how it played out. At the same time, I was ready for Livia to die at the end of season 1. Like, I was ready for him to go, I guess not quite go nuts with a pillow. And if we want to make another connection here, the mother in The Public Enemy is changing the pillowcases, and he was gonna suffocate his own mother with a pillow. I don't think he's thinking about that, but yeah.
What a great detail. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but I was kind of ready for it then. I was ready for the show to move on to bigger and other things. I mean, but that sounds weird. But it's like, it's felt a bit like these 2 episodes were clearing the chessboard a bit. Like, obviously, we're losing a big piece with Livia, but also in general, the first episode, like, resetting a lot. It feels like it makes sense that they would broadcast these 2 episodes together, because and me not knowing what's going to happen, I think whatever season 3 is going to be, we're going to find out next episode, or we're going to get started properly next episode.
Yeah, it does feel like that either way, and I mean, I'm not going to say anything either way, but yeah, I feel like it does, especially knowing that they aired together. It makes perfect sense. It is a weird, like, setting up something a little bit new, clearing things, and all right, here we go. Now we can get going with, here's season 3. We've kind of fixed some of our baggage, and now it's like we're off to the races.
Yeah, just like you and me, Jim, on our rewatch of season 3, or watch in my case. Send in your thoughts on season 3 on this episode. Did you see Big Pussy in the mirror? Did you see it the first time, the second time? Did you have any idea what we were talking about? Send an email to showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com. And we'll get into it on the podcast. You can also, of course, go to youtube.com/showswhatyouknow for our live streams, which happen on Sundays. And you can also check out showswhatyouknow.com for all of our podcast feeds. And subscribe. Please do leave a review on iTunes. We very much appreciate it. A 5-star review is fine. Even better if you put in 5 stars and then you write a little comment about what you like about the show. What would you like to see more of? We really take that into consideration a lot more than anything else. So if you want to affect anything on the show, please leave it in an iTunes review.
Yes. And you said the email, right?
Yeah, I said the email, showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com.
So yeah, all kinds of good stuff. And of course, you can find more of us. You can find more of Jacob at awesomepedia.org, and you can find more from me at jimandthem.com. I thank you, dear listener. Let's continue this season 3 ride.
Absolutely. And there's just one thing before that.
Oh, what's that?
Cut to black.